Hey, Anthony. I'm talking to you. Hey. What's up, man?
Hold on. Let's pause for a second. What's the right thing to do in this situation? Do you try to punch back, or do you try to forgive? Hi, I'm Anthony. See, me and my friends, Alex and Bryson, we're trying to figure something out. What we want to know is, does the church approve of revenge? So, with the help of Dr. Huck, we'll try to figure out whether or not the church reviews revenge as good, the same way a society does. But before we get started, what is revenge? According to the dictionary, revenge is the action of inflicting hurt or harm on someone for an injury or wrong suffered at their hands. So essentially, trying to make things even with someone. When you look at the way revenge has had an effect on people throughout history, we can see that, for the most part, the cause for revenge is usually still the same. One person or group of people upset another person or group of people to the point where they're the ones who got upset had to do the same thing back to them. See, this ideology is oftentimes defended and justified by the phrase, an eye for an eye. A good example of this in history is with the Romans. In early Roman society, revenge was always justified, as long as the act of revenge was equal to the damage that was done to the victim. You see, this belief has been continued throughout all of human history, which is the main reason as to why we are recording this video. So in essence, thank you ancient Romans for giving us the theme for this video, but also don't thank you, I guess, for making revenge a common belief in society today. But anyway, despite any ancient Roman rulings or laws, revenge is the main way that many people in today's world live by. So now, let's see what happens when the path of revenge is chosen by our friends from the opening clip.
Come on.
As we now know what revenge is, as Anthony explained it, we can now explore society's interpretation of it. As you can see in this clip, the initial act reflected on the wrong of bullying involved the punch back, hoping to hurt the bully and equalize the pain. But instead, it just made matters worse. Society's view on revenge includes the feeling of wanting to get back at someone so they can suffer what you had to. Although it may not be the most successful, society has pushed away that thought because of the urge in one's mind to get back at one another. There is a very few group of people that can stray from their own emotional feeling and not allow it to affect their actions, but this does not speak for everyone. Many do try to hold back their emotional feelings to inflict pain on one another, but the heart of society rests in their own emotions, allowing them to control all of their actions no matter the impact on others. From past experiences like the bombing of Pearl Harbor resulting in World War II, and even today the death penalty and how it is used, has evolved the standard understanding of when revenge is necessary and how successful it is when used.
How's it view revenge? It doesn't like it. Oh, I'm sorry. There should be more to that, right? Yeah. So anyway, actually, yeah, it really kind of goes against the very core of who we are, because first of all, keep in mind that church teachings are rooted in Scripture. You know, these are not just things that they make up, but you know, there is a biblical foundation for it. And for us particularly, our real foundation is Jesus, right? And to look at what does Jesus tell us about revenge? And of course, obviously, in various parts of the gospel, right, he tells us not to do it, right? You know, for instance, you know, he says, well, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, right? I tell you. So he's he's actually giving us that commandment, right? To love one another, right? To love one another, do good to those who persecute you. Jesus, a lot of times, people tend to think of some of his teachings as being simplistic, but actually they're rather profound, because this idea of loving one another changes things, and it changes this people. Plus the fact that what he's really talking about is breaking a cycle of violence, right? Like when Jesus says turn the other cheek, right? And right off the bat we think, oh, well, that's just crazy. Who would do that, right? But the fact is that if you harm me and then I harm you, where does that stop, right? Then we're just caught in a cycle of violence that doesn't stop. Which, once again, these teachings from Scripture influence Catholic social teaching. Pope Francis made an interesting comment. Pope Francis says that evil knows revenge, right? Evil knows revenge. And those who get caught up into it wind up spreading that evil, and in turn they suffocate the earth, right? And so what Pope Francis is saying is that, well, if we give into these concepts of evil and retribution and revenge and so forth, then those concepts spread, and they do real and irreparable harm, right? And once again, just kind of give a sense of that, right? If you think about in the 1960s with the Freedom Riders, right? They were going into areas of the South, and they had to put up with incredible hardship. Matter of fact, in Alabama, where they stopped the bus and they brutally beat all those people, those people did not strike back, right? And that was really kind of the hallmark of the civil rights movement, was that they used those the teachings of Scripture to realize that if they were to fight back, then once again ongoing circle of violence, right? That they had the courage to say that our faith, right, rooted in Scripture, can do amazing things in breaking a cycle of violence and envisioning a new world and a new reality. And so really, revenge certainly is not something that's preached by the church in any means, right? Speaking of revenge, right, because I'm sure in ethics you're probably going through death penalty and so forth, right? And that's a journey that the church has taken as well. The idea that, well, the death penalty is kind of simply put a form of revenge, right? And if we, as a society, get onto that road, then it belittles our humanity, right? In fact, Sister Helen Prejean really kind of made the point that every human being is worth more than their worst actions, right? But when we take on the attitude of revenge, what we're saying is that the other person is not human, right? They're not human. We demonize them because it's easy to hate a demon. It's easy to kill a demon, right? It's a very difficult thing to kill a human being, right? And so the Catechism reminds us is that revenge cripples the concept of dignity and respect. So emphatically, the church is very much against any form of revenge.
Finding forgiveness means to put any negative emotions or intentions to rest and come to a peaceful resolution to settle a dispute. When faced with the question of whether or not forgiveness would be the best course of action in a hypothetical scenario, the vast majority would say that this is true. However, much fewer will be able to make the same decision if the problem would come into fruition at their opposition. In contrast to the readily forgiving nature of Jesus Christ, people in modern society are not quick to settle a dispute by turning the other cheek. The recent clip demonstrates how, when faced with a situation where someone is being put down, The common reaction is to attempt to inflict a similar pain in return. Forgiveness is difficult to muster after being wronged because society teaches everyone to seek immediate justice rather than trying to benefit both sides. Even though, as Catholics, we know it is wrong to come back at another person and cause an equal amount of physical or emotional pain, these understandings become a challenge to put into practice in the face of a real situation.
The church really, yeah, that's kind of the hallmark in a sense, right? Uh, Forgiveness should be everything that we're really about, right? Because when we forgive, we begin to mirror the grace of God, right? I mean, think about it. God has forgiven us for everything, right? And has forgiven our worst actions and our worst deeds. But on the same token, right? God expects the same of us. Here, once again, in the Our Father, right? We say, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those, right, who trespass against us." We're expected to extend that, right? Just as God has given us this infinite grace, we're expected to show that grace, right, in very real ways of forgiveness and understanding. Because in forgiving somebody, first of all, you kind of recognize within yourself that you are flawed, right? That you are flawed. You are not perfect. You are not without sin. And so if I can acknowledge that, then who am I to withhold that from somebody else, right? Interesting note. Mahatma Gandhi, who really kind of led nonviolent resistance against British forces in India, and he really promoted forgiveness. But Mahatma Gandhi, who comes from a Hindu and Jainist background, every day he meditated upon the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus, right? And he said that that's where he really got a full concept, or a very living concept of what forgiveness was, right? So once again, what does the church teach? Well, first of all, it tells us to go to Scripture, right, to look at what Jesus has told us, and we're constantly reminded, right, that just as I have forgiven you, right, I expect this of you. Just as I have loved you, I expect you to love others. And part of what love is forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is also about envisioning a new future, right? That you have hope, right? It brings hope. It encapsulates hope. Kind of a great example. My brother lives in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and Belfast has had a rough history, right? I mean, it's things are pretty good now, but it's had an incredible history of bloodshed, and a lot of that is because of this retribution going back and forth, right? That you shot some of ours, we're going to shoot some of yours, right? You blew up one of our buildings, we're going to blow up one of your buildings. You burned down one of our churches, we'll burn down one of your churches. And it wasn't until you got to a point where people had decided, you know what? We don't want our children to grow up in the same society that we have grown up, and our parents have grown up, and our grandparents have grown up. We want to break that cycle, right? And it really meant that they actually had to learn how to forgive, right? I mean, we think that it's kind of silly. You actually have to take courses on forgiveness, but no, that's for many cases they had to learn that that by forgiving they break that cycle, because as Jesus reminds us that those who live by the sword will perish by the sword, right? Violence begets violence. Or in the book of Romans, right? In Romans, it basically tells us that you need to take the higher road, right? That two wrongs don't make a right. So you got to take the higher road, once again, to break that whole cycle of violence. So in the church, right, we're really taught about that type of forgiveness, right? That, we have to reach within ourselves, realize that, none of us is without fault. And then therefore, who are we to make that judgment, right? Only God can make that judgment. And perhaps if we can really reach out without the eyes of retribution, but with hearts of love, then maybe we can transform people, right? And that's really what we're called to do, is to as Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. And that love will change things. That love will transform things, and we will see the people through a lens of dignity and respect, and we're not going to want to harm them, right? And that's really that's kind of what we're taught in regards to forgiveness.
Is that all you got?
Remember what I taught you.
Listen here, pal. I've got something to say. What? I'm not gonna fight you. It's not worth it. I forgive you, man.
Oh, thank you. That's all I wanted to hear. Have a good one.
Cool. You too.
So now let's see what some of our peers think about revenge. When asked about whether or not society and the church both view revenge in the same manner, many said that they are different in the way that the church is against it, while society is all for it. However, when we asked whether or not revenge can be justified, the results were very split. One person said, "I do believe that revenge is sometimes justified, because if someone can just do something again with no repercussions, they'll just continue doing it, and sometimes legal action does not affect them." And while another person said, "It should not be justified no matter the situation. Taking revenge has no benefit. It hurts all parties involved. It hurts the person who acts on revenge, the person they're trying to hurt, and anyone else who's around them, who's trying to help either party. Revenge does not lead to anything good, and rather than healing the person, it brings more hatred into their heart." We would like to say thank you to everyone who sent in their responses. So, after watching the skits and giving our lessons, I think it's safe to say that we all learned a little bit more about revenge. We got to hear some background information on revenge, both society's and the church's views on revenge and forgiveness, and we got to hear what some of our peers felt about it. So now I'm going to go pass it on to Alex. Alex, what did you think?
The takeaway from this whole video is that the church and society are known to have conflicting opinions on the topic of revenge, just as with many other controversial topics. The church is grounded in moral beliefs that highlight compassion and thoughtfulness. We are taught to treat others how we would like to be treated, loving our neighbor as ourselves. Society, on the other hand, is frequently misguided from having good morals. As a result, society is not against ideas such as revenge that enforce the mindset of benefiting oneself without much concern for others. Similarly, finding forgiveness is a fundamental concept in the church's teachings. It is the ideal way that conflicts are to be settled in order to reduce the amount of damage caused and to not allow the situation to progress or elevate any further. As members of the Catholic faith, although we are also obviously members of society, it is our responsibility to make the often challenging decision to choose the church's side. If we could find guidance in the moral principles of the church, we would actively be proponents of peace in our society.
To sum up what we have gone over, we briefly introduced a clip of a possible scenario that could have invoked an urge of revenge in someone. Anthony then provided us with an introduction into what revenge is and how it has evolved over time. The sole shaping of this video came from the similarities and differences of feeling in society and the church's take on revenge and if it is needed. First, going over society's views on both revenge and forgiveness helped to set the ground floor of opinion, then helping us glide into the church's opinion. Dr. Huck was a great advocate for the opinions of the church on this topic of interest. He was able to touch on the best possible ideas invested in the church to bring forth its greatest reasoning. As students at St. Thomas Aquinas High School and members of both campus ministry and the Catholic faith, we had a sense of both opinions, allowing us to pull out the greatest ideas to talk upon.